Let's continue our discussion on Module 3.3. In particular, we will see climate change in the Philippines and Mindanao context. Again, due to human activities that increase the concentration of GHG or greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, causes the amplified global warming. This is different from the natural global warming that we need on Earth. No? And this causes ice cover melting, sea level rise, ocean acidification, as well as erratic changes in our climate and weather. And there are several impacts, which include changes in the rainfall pattern and extreme weather events such as tropical cyclones and extreme rainfall, frequent and severe heat waves, as well as increase in floods, occurrences of floods, landslide, and drought. Okay, so these are the hazards, and these hazards pose great challenge to our socioeconomic sectors. And here, the exposure and vulnerability part, of the risk to climate change has to be considered. Okay, so before that, what is hazard? Hazard is the potential occurrence of a natural or human-induced physical event that may cause adverse effects on a given area. For instance, tropical cyclones is an example of hazard. Increase in rainfall, extreme rainfall, is also an example of hazards. How about exposure? Exposure refers to the inventory of elements in a given locality wherein hazards may occur. These elements refer to people, economic activities that are exposed to hazard. And of course, vulnerability. Vulnerability is the susceptibility of exposed elements to suffer adverse effects when impacted by hazards. It deals with the propensity, sensitivity, or lack of capacities and resilience of those exposed to cope with hazards and respond to potential disaster. Okay, and as we all know, climate change will impact our health sector, agricultural sector, forest, water resource, our coastal area will greatly be affected, and even our species, no, and other natural areas. Okay, and climate change has been studied, no, since 1990 by the international community, and these are formal reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I think they will release a new one this year or next year. Okay, and these reports include climate projections. So, what are climate projections? These are just scenario, future scenario. What will happen um, if we, for instance, start mitigating? What will happen in the future? What will happen if we don't do anything, no, to mitigate the effect of climate change? Now, these climate projections have uncertainty. No? We usually use climate models, and these climate models are just approximation of nature. So there are uncertainty to these climate projections. That's why when we talk about climate projections, we actually give give some prospect, probability of what will going to happen in the future. So there are uncertainties not to these models, climate models, and but this uncertainty can give us a range of possible futures. No? This give the policymakers, for instance, some um, some possible solutions, no, to the effect of climate change. Models include representative concentration pathway. So these representative concentration pathways, these are actually the climate scenarios. No? What will happen if if it's business as usual, meaning we just keep on producing these greenhouse gases. But what will happen if we start mitigating now? What will happen if we start mitigating in the near future, and so on? So we call this representative concentration pathway. And climate modeling, this RCPs are very important. Okay, so using these RCPs, we will know what are the best case scenario and the worst case scenarios. No? Okay, so what are we adapting to? These climate projections, again, are just possible future of climate due to global warming. And we are talking about the 20th global warming. And in fact, up until now, we're experiencing this one and we will experience it in the future. Okay. And throughout our discussion, we will uh, show you some results of modeling showing near future projections, which is mostly around this year, and mid future projections, mostly around this year. And some of the studies also show far future projection, which is nearing 21st century. So these are our RCPs. RCPs only give us an idea on how much emission is the global community producing. So this blue line show us the worst case scenario. We call it RCP 8.5. It means business as usual, no mitigation at all. Okay, and then the best case scenario is the green lines. It means we start mitigating now, and we should start now, and eventually we lower our emission of greenhouse gases. Okay, this example is for carbon dioxide only, and then we also have the intermediate um, RCPs or climate scenario. So the red one only means that we slow down GHG emission and by 2030 we start reducing it. Okay. The black one is we mitigate later. Okay. Maybe by 2060 we try to mitigate so that we can have a more reduced productions of um, carbon dioxide, for instance. Okay. So in the future, these are all IPCC reports, part of the IPCC reports. In the future, um, best case is we will still experience global warming, but not as much as the worst case scenario. This is the scenario where we don't do mitigation. So as you can see, there will be an increase in future temperature, global temperature by as high as maybe 12 degrees or more. And we can also see that the Philippines actually will experience an increase maybe of more than 4 degrees Celsius in the worst case scenario. Again, even if we follow the best case scenario, meaning we mitigate, we will still experience global warming. And this global warming will bring erratic conditions, no? Erratic climate conditions. Okay. In terms of precipitation, there's a mixed signal. So if we see this brown shade, it means there's a drier climate. A drier climate means the precipitation is less than the normal. There is still precipitation, but less than the normal or the average precipitation that we can experience. Now, the red one, it means wetter condition. So, what are the corresponding impacts of a drier and wetter climate? For a drier climate, there are possible droughts, no, will be experienced. Possible, probably it will also affect tropical cyclones in our sides, uh, and many more other, no. For the worst case scenario with extreme signals, no, of wet and dry anomaly, basically we will expect droughts as well as extreme rainfall events, no, that will surely affect our um, daily lives. Okay, so in a globally warmer world, no, fewer cold days are virtually certain. Frequent hot days and nights are also virtually certain. Very likely there will be warm spells. Okay, these are the extreme temperature, and these two are very much related to us. Heavy rainfall events and an increase in intense tropical cyclone will more likely than not to occur. Okay, so let's look at climate change projections in the Philippines. So there has been several studies um, conducted by our scientists. Okay, and so far, this graph show us the observed climate from 1951 to 2010, and we can see this increasing trend already with zero point 0.1 degree Celsius increase, average increase per decade. You know? So this means that um, almost zero point 0.6 degree have increased in our average temperature since 1951. In terms of rainfall, it's again, no, rainfall pattern is really very erratic. The signals are quite different. So the this map shows us the total rainfall, while this map, which is very important to us, show us extreme rainfall. This means that these are the rainfall that are above, uh, way above the average. Okay, and we can see that the annual total and extreme rainfall have been changing from 10 to 40 millimeter per decade. Note that the annual or monthly average rainfall, uh, let's say in Davao, range only from around 100 to 200 millimeter. And take note that this increase, no, it's about how many percent, no, more than 10% of that um, monthly rainfall. Okay, and that is very significant. That is very significant. So historical climatology may be used to establish the link between climate and impact sectors. What are the impact sectors? Are health, agriculture, um, uh, what else? Food sectors, no, etc. Okay, so these are the projected rainfall changes in the future. Okay, of course, in terms of temperature, it is projected to even increase higher than zero point 0.6 degrees Celsius. In terms of rainfall, no, we can see here maps of wettest possible um, period, no, during these months. Okay, also the median or the those that are just near the normal uh, rainfall amount, and the driest possible. So this is very, this is of course may cause drought, no, to these areas. So notice, no, the extreme conditions um, in several areas, especially for the wettest part. No, we can probably experience that in these months, no, December, January, and February. It doesn't mean that there is high intensity rain. It means there are more intense rain, no, than normal. Okay, and for the driest possible um, percentile, we can see that Mindanao is very vulnerable. Okay, so there's an increase or decrease in extreme seasonal rainfall by as much as 40%. Most probable rainfall change is still within range of natural variability with current coping range. Actionable climate change adaptation plans might be required to cope during the wettest, mm, and the driest, almost all seasons, no, driest seasons. Okay. How about tropical cyclones? Now, tropical cyclones, no, this is historical tracks. Tropical cyclones is actually seasonal. So if you notice here in Mindanao, we mostly experience tropical cyclone during December or April. This is when the northeast monsoon or amihan is very active. Remember, amihan and habagat are actually very strong and large wind systems. So during amihan, this wind system will push, no, most of these tropical cyclones near our area. Okay, so in Luzon, May to November, no, is the uh, almost all year round actually, no, but the peak, of course, is during the season, maybe July, no, August, September, and October. Then for Visayas throughout the year, because it's actually Visayas is basically the where the most the tropical cyclone belt, no, of the Philippines. But then again, it's seasonal, no. So this is our TC season, and during our TC season, no, from July to October, November, no, it mostly Luzon and Visayas experience this one. So again, for Mindanao, TC cross mostly during December and April. Okay. In particular, for Davao City, we experience this peak during November and December. Okay. Um, if we look at this map shows the trend, meaning there's whether there's an increase, the blue shade, or I mean decrease, no, in tropical cyclones, or red, meaning there's an increase. Okay, so as you can see, this is just a trend. It doesn't mean that um, Luzon have a lower number of tropical cyclone as compared to Mindanao. It only means that Luzon, with this red shade, it's experiencing less and less tropical cyclones, so lower than normal. Okay, while for Mindanao, we are actually experiencing an increased number of tropical cyclones. Okay, and most of these increases in tropical cyclones over Mindanao are actually caused by tropical storm and tropical depression. These are very weak tropical cyclones, but they usually bring high amount of rainfall. So they are still very dangerous. No, it can still lead to disaster if the vulnerable sectors or the exposed sectors are not mitigated. No, okay. Okay, now how about the projected changes in tropical cyclones? Okay, so again, we will use the near future, meaning uh, in the near future, actually, it's already, this year is already included, no, in this projection. Mid futures around 2030s, no? Far future is up to the 21st century. Okay, and blue shades means there will be a decrease in the number of tropical cyclones, while red means there will be an increase in the number of tropical cyclones. And we can see a very diverse signals. No, well, because as I've shown you earlier, tropical cyclones um, climatology in the Philippines is also seasonal. Okay, so what did the experts found? There's an increase in the number of tropical cyclones over most Luzon until mid future period. Okay, there will be an increased number of theses over Mindanao and most of the Visayas in the near future, but a decrease afterwards. You can see this blue shades. So there will be a decrease in tropical cyclone frequency over most parts of the country in the future, especially in far future, no, near the 21st century. Okay, but in terms of intensity, again, no, even if there's a decrease, no, in the less intense wind, there will be an increase in tropical cyclones with more intense wind. Probably this may explain why we are experiencing super typhoons, more super typhoons now than before. Okay, okay. Now let's move to climate change projections in Mindanao. There are many studies using those climate scenarios or climate projections. In this presentation, I will only show studies from Manila Observatory. If you want to see more studies, you can go to Pag-asa website. They've been releasing uh, these climate change projections for each region. For now, I will just show you some cities in Mindanao. Okay, and the study is conducted by Manila Observatory. Manila Observatory is actually a sister company of Ateneo de Davao University. Okay, so this was established by uh, priests, no, Jesuit priests, and it was actually the first before Pag-asa was born. Manila Observatory actually was the weather bureau of the Philippines during the American era. Okay, so again, this IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, have released several reports. Okay, on the impact and on the assessment, no, of future climate change. However, these reports, okay, are global in coverage, coarse in resolution, and Philippine, for instance, no, it's quite very small in the global perspective. It's not well represented in most of these reports. Okay, so for instance, this is an example of a report from IPCC, and this grid, no, represent actually the a value, one value for each grid, and we can see that the Philippines only is contained in four grids, so it's very this report is unrealistic, no, when we look at uh, when we go when we zoom in, no, to our country. Okay, so we call this global climate models. So what do? We downscale these global climate models using another set of models. We call it regional climate models to simulate the effects of local scale forcing and provides fine or higher resolution. Okay, okay, so we call that downscaling. Okay. And in the Philippines, one of the institution that do this that does this downscaling of global climate models output is the Regional Climate System Division of the Manila Observatory. No. Okay. So I will show you the output of um, studies of Manila Observatory. Basically, what the Manila Observatory does is to downscale the global climate models output or report. No? So we have several possible future um, uh, due to climate scenarios due to anthropogenic climate change. Okay, and for the Manila Observatory report, I will just show you this middle uh, scenario, no? The RCP 4.5. So RCP 4.5 is the red curve. So we in this scenario mitigation scenario, we are um, we are expected to slow down greenhouse gas emission by 2030 and then continually reduce it, no, and make the uh, and make it maybe constant by 2050s and so on. Okay, so we will the assumption here is that it will be very difficult, no, especially for a developing country to maintain this best case scenario. So we tried to model the intermediate case scenario. Okay. Okay. So again, no, in studying the scenario, we have in using climate models, we must always look at the uncertainty or of the possible as a range of possible futures. No? For instance, if this is the average or if this is the um, simulated average temperature, let's say, no, this shaded area are actually the uncertainty, and we can think of it as the possible futures, minimum and maximum. Okay, so I will show you, temperature anomalies, and which basically it only means that the actual or the baseline, um, is subtracted, no, from the so the actual value is subtracted from the baseline. Okay, so if we see some positive values, it means there's an increase in daily temperature and the effect is warming. If there are negative values or negative anomaly, there it means there is a decrease in daily temperature, a decrease in daily temperature, and the effect is cooling. In terms of precipitation, so okay, let's go back. Okay, so for precipitation, no, when we see positive anomaly, it means, or positive values, it means there's an increase in rainfall and the effect is a wetter climate. If we see negative anomaly or negative values, it means decrease in rainfall and there is a drier climate. So I will just show you results of Manila Observatory in terms of temperature anomaly and precipitation anomaly. Okay. So the study areas are Cagayan de Oro, Zamboanga City, Davao City, and Davao Oriental. So these are the partner agencies, okay, of Manila Observatory. So the study for Cagayan de Oro is uh, with collaboration with USAID project. In Zamboanga City, Christian Aid uh, Post-Yolanda project helped us produce the results. For Davao City and Davao Oriental, the Oscar Lopez Center for Climate Change Adaptation and Disaster Risk Management Foundations helped us produce climate change projections. Okay, so this is the result for Cagayan de Oro in terms of temperature anomaly. As you can see, no, this is we will only show you the near future projections and the far future projection, mid future projections. And as we can see, this is historical. So there's already an increased trend, no, in the historical temperature anomaly. And then in the near future, there will be a zero point 0.9 degrees Celsius. And in the far future, mid future, there will be a 1.5 degrees Celsius. Again, take note that this small increase in temperature um, will affect, no, will affect several sectors of our society. Okay, as I've shown you in the second part of our lecture for this module. Um, Spatially, or in terms of the horizontal distribution, we can see that this map show us a warmer area, no, in the um, north and western part, no, of Cagayan de Oro City, okay, with a smaller increase, no, in near the mountainous area, okay. But in the mid future, we can see it will increase even higher, no, even up to 1.7 degree. Note these numbers are just average, okay. It means there are peak, okay. For instance, this one 1.5, but we can actually find more than 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, okay, and that is already alarming. In terms of rainfall, so this is when we see this red uh, bar graph, no? This means there is a wetter condition, wetter climate, and these are the number of years. These correspond to years, no? And we can see that in the near future there will be 21 years, no, of wetter climate for Cagayan de Oro, and then in the far future this will decrease. But in the far future, the number of drier climate will increase for Cagayan de Oro, and this can be reflected in this map. No? We can see quite the gray shade or colors here mark here means there's a negative anomaly or drier condition. So in the near future, including now, there is actually a wetter condition of climate for Cagayan de Oro City, but from from this mid future projection, Cagayan de Oro will experience a drier climate, okay, as which is reflected in this number of years, no, with drier climate. This may be due to, of course, whether it's climate variability or an enhanced, let's say, El Nino, no, enhanced drought conditions. Okay, so let's look at Zamboanga City. So if you notice for CDO, it's for the near future projections, it's only around 1 degree increase, but for Zamboanga, it's actually very high, okay, and even higher, in the far future projections. We can see here a spatial map, of these increases, and most of the increase can actually be observed, in residential areas near the coastal regions. Okay, this is actually a very high increase, 2.3, no, up to 2.3 or even higher if we really look into inside this map. Okay, in terms of precipitation, it's also very uh, Zamboanga City will also experience quite a drastic change. No, there will be an 18 in the near future and even mid future. It will experience this much of drier climate. Okay, which is also reflected in the map. Okay, even um, in the near future or now, no, I think Zamboanga City is already experiencing this a drier climate. So a drier climate doesn't mean that there will be no rain. It only means that the rain is lower than the average climatology for Zamboanga City. Okay. How about Davao City? Okay. So Davao City, just like Zamboanga City, will experience this much increase. Okay, in the near future now and mid future projections. Okay, so this is actually a very high increase in temperature, and we can see, in this map that almost all parts of Davao City will experience this uh, higher increase in temperature. So this is very alarming. But then again, these are just projections, possible projections for in the future if we only mitigate later. Okay. So in terms of rainfall, um, we'll experience more rainfall, no? Wet years, more wet years. Okay, than dry years. Okay, but if we look at the anomaly in terms of map, no, in the mid-future projection, especially the higher region, no, will experience a drier anomaly. So what is the possible complication of this? No, our water resource, there will be less rain in areas of our watersheds, okay, which may greatly affect our renewable water, okay, groundwater uh, resources. Okay. For Davao Oriental, no, the increase is also a bit high, but not as high as for Davao City and for Zamboanga City. Okay, and this is the what it looks like on a map. Okay, so it will be a warm, higher, no, a warming. There will be warming. Okay, projections for Davao Oriental also. In terms of rainfall, um, what struck us is there will be wetter climate in the future than drier years. Okay, there are more wetter years than drier years. Okay, so in summary, no, just to summarize the four areas that we presented, no, the CDO and all cities, okay, will experience an increase in the temperature. But in terms of precipitation, there are mixed signals. Okay, but of course, among these cities, Zamboanga City will experience quite a challenging number of dry years, no, as compared to other cities. Okay, okay. So in summary, CDO and Zamboanga City will experience drier years, no, for all this near future and mid future projections. For Davao City and Davao Oriental, there is a mix. There's a mixed signals. No? In the near future projections, there will be a wetter, while in the mid future, this year doesn't mean that it will happen on 2025. This is basically just the mid year. Okay, uh, this is, I think, from 2005 to 2036, and this is from 2035 to 2065. Okay, so there will be a drier future for all these major cities in Mindanao. Okay. Again, no, recall the impacts of this increase in temperature. Even very small increase will results to a higher percentage of um, uh, risk, no, to climate change. So, and as we increase, okay, the number of vulnerable sectors will also increase in terms of water, flooding, and even the ecosystems. No? And of course, the extreme events are also very much affected by a small increase in uh, temperature. Okay, and in thinking about this, the impacts of climate change, no, we must always look at it in a holistic way. Okay, we look at the risk as a result of uh, the vulnerability, exposure, and hazard. Okay, so we must look at in this. We must try to adapt, no, do some adaptation uh, by probably increasing, no, or decreasing our vulnerability and decreasing our exposure to these hazards. Okay, and we cannot possibly change the hazards, but we can lessen the effect of uh, climate change, no, or global warming to the intensification of these hazards by doing mitigations. Okay, so the Philippines, no, is already at risk to disasters, no, with our geographical locations. We experience typhoon, extreme rainfall due to monsoons. We even experience droughts, no, due to our geographic location. And these are natural phenomena. However, if we include the exposure and the vulnerability, no, of the people of our populations, and there's a potential that this hazard will lead to disaster. And in a globally warmer world, no, with an increase in this intensity, intense typhoon, extreme heavy rainfall, no, and other hazards, the disaster risk also will increase. No, so what we can do is really to do mitigations, adaptations, and risk reduction. Okay, okay. To end this lecture, no, let me read uh, what Pope Francis wrote in Laudato Si. Our goal is not to amass information or to satisfy curiosity, but rather to become painfully aware. So, dare to turn what is happening to the world into our personal suffering and thus to discover what each of us can do about it. Okay. So, let's do this with social justice and equity in our mind. Okay. Thank you very much.